It smells delicious. We want to get all of that moisture out of there. And I gathered these about 2 weeks ago. Mm-mm-mm. That's right. Put a camp up right here. My acorns for the season. That's how well I've done on the acorn front. I'm really proud of this. I got a ton of acorns for this year. Test, test, test. All right, looks like everything's working. It smells very earthy. All right. So I'm basically doing this for myself because I'll tell you what, I worked on the acorns for a long time last year, did a real thorough thing with acorns, and that video just has never taken off, which really surprises me. It's such an easy project with so many positives. There's just so many things you can do with this free resource. And it's shocking to me that more people aren't fascinated by it and interested in it. Right now we're getting it to come out in chunks. I'll get better at this as we go along. That I learned from last year. There you go. There's a nice whole one. Nice whole acorn there. And it's actually... they don't need to come out whole and purdy like that, because you're going to want these in smaller pieces if you're going to roast those and make them into a snack, or you're going to grind them down into a flour or into a coffee substitute. Acorns have something in them called tannins, and it's kind of a bitter taste and gives some people diarrhea. So what a lot of people do is they'll soak their acorns for a long time to get those tannins out of there. The water will turn yellow and orange and stuff like that. What I like to do to get the tannins out is to boil my acorns, because it's a faster process. And then after you boil the acorns, you can roast them and do all sorts of good things to them. And I gathered these acorns about 2 weeks ago, and I've just been having them sitting around here in their shells for these past couple of weeks, and they've stayed just fine. What I mean is they haven't started to rot or anything like that. They stay pretty fresh in those shells until you can get to them. I did set my bag of acorns out into the sun and let any moisture that might have been in the bag with them, let that moisture dry out to prevent rot. When I did this last year, I enjoyed having the acorn flour and coffee substitute and the snack so much that I realized that I wasn't going to have enough to get me through the entire winter. Now I did, because I was careful about how many I used, but I resolved that this year I would collect a whole lot more so that I would not run out, and that I would have enough to potentially last me even a couple of years. You know, you get like a small window in the fall to collect things like this, and if you miss your window of opportunity, well, you have to wait an entire season. That's no fun sometimes when you want what you want. See, when the shell will have a crack in it, sometimes you'll get maggots when you open her up. Oh, and those maggots won't hurt you. They're just in there feeding on that rotten acorn, but they sure are kind of gross, and I don't want to eat them. Does that mean I wouldn't eat them? No, it doesn't mean that. I definitely would eat them if I were desperate enough. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not going to hurt you. But if I don't have to, then I would prefer not to. There's a bigger chance of finding maggots or bugs the longer they've been sitting on the ground. So the sooner you can harvest them off the ground, the less time they're sitting there on the ground in all sorts of weather, then the better opportunity you have of getting a nice fresh acorn. Like that. That's a nice fresh acorn. You see nice fresh yellow meat there on the inside. From what I understand, the Afghans harvest acorns and make acorn flour, and they make it in enormous batches, and they use acorn flour for lots of things. So it's not just a survival thing. It's, for some people, it's just like gardening or going to the grocery store. Just every year, collecting your acorns and making your acorn flour. There's like a double shell on these acorns. So this is like the outer shell here, and you can get that outer shell off, but then there's a shell on the inside there. So you got to try to get through both those shells and get just to the meat on the inside of the acorn. You see that? So this is an acorn. That's actually really good. See if you can see that. The different layers of the shell and then the meat on the inside. So you want to make sure you get down through both layers of that shell, and so you can just pop out the meat itself on the inside. Just the fresh, delicious meat. There's a lot of satisfaction in doing this sort of thing. I could have music playing right now or a movie playing right now while I'm working on this, or an audiobook, but then I'd run into copyright issues with my video. So, but because I don't have any entertainment going on, I just kind of get lost in my thoughts while I'm doing this, which is it's not a terrible thing. It's kind of therapeutic. My old mentor, Cherokee Indian Dave Selvage, when I was growing up, he always knitted, always working on some knitting project. And, the way I growed up, I didn't think that sort of thing was very manly. So it's not something that ever would have occurred to me to do. But I thought he was manly. And seeing him knit in the evenings with like a little glass of bourbon or something really left an impression on me. And so there's a lot of things that folks wouldn't think of as manly until a manly person makes them manly. I'm not saying I'm that guy, but I don't worry too much about what people are going to think. For these sorts of things like foraging, collecting, seasonal things, you kind of got to be real flexible. You might be out doing something with your family or with friends and notice a big mess of acorns or wild edibles or something lying around. That's your opportunity, man. That's your window right there. You don't really get to choose when the right time to pick a pawpaw fruit is, acorns, or any other sorts of seasonal things. So that's what I mean about being flexible. You've got to be flexible enough to say, this is my moment, and seize it. Whether you particularly feel like picking up acorns or something is kind of besides the point, right? You kind of got to seize the moment when the moment is there, rather than like, today I feel like a Big Mac, so I'm going to run down to McDonald's and get myself a Big Mac. It's not like that. It's more like, hey, there it is. I can get it now or miss my window of opportunity. Am I willing to put in the energy and time right now, even though it wasn't on my plans of things to do today? Am I going to take advantage of this opportunity? You know, it's a common theme in my life. This past summer, going over into this field nearby to pick peaches on a tree because the peaches were ripe. You know, do I want fresh peaches off of that tree? Well, the tree decides, doesn't it? The season decides. And on my way over there, I come across a big pokeweed plant. Somebody had knocked down this big pokeweed plant, and I had wanted to make myself some pokeweed salad. Well, there's my opportunity. So it's not a good time for me to say, well, boy, I really wasn't planning on dealing with pokeweed, picking the pokeweed and working with the pokeweed. It's the time to say, you know what, there's the pokeweed. It's right there. There's the peaches too, so I'm going to do both things. And I don't know what I had planned for that day, but it certainly wasn't picking and preparing pokeweed. Still, whatever I had planned, I had the flexibility to put it off a little bit longer so that I could get that pokeweed. And it was one of my favorite things I did this summer was pick and prepare that pokeweed. It was delicious. I'll tell you, when I come across this mess of acorns on a camping trip, we had a heat spell around these parts. So it was like 90 degrees that day. Last thing on earth I felt like doing was being out there in that blazing sun, picking up acorns off the ground. But man, I mean, just look at the quality of these acorns. These are quality acorns, and they were in such number and fallen off the tree right when I was there. I just couldn't pass that up. So I went ahead and set aside whatever I had plans to do, and I stood out in that blazing sun and collected these acorns, and I'm so glad I did. But that again comes from a willingness to be flexible, opportunistic. That's what I think of it as. Being a good outdoorsman lots of times involves being opportunistic. I'm pretty sure in a video I saw last year that what I saw these Afghan women doing was processing these acorns, shell and all. And they had such an efficient way of doing it. I'm going to have to try to find that video again. They certainly didn't go through this whole process that I'm going through right now of shelling each one, one by one. I think that they processed the acorn by the shell and everything and turned that into flour. So this is the way I do it. That's what I'm showing off. And other cultures around the world probably have their ways of doing it too. They might even be superior to my way of doing it. One thing I was thinking of while I was picking these up, those are not light. When this thing was full up with all those acorns, this bag was really pretty heavy. And I'm thinking, that big oak tree is holding all of that weight. I mean, this is a fraction of the acorns that were in that tree. But that tree is up there holding, all those branches are holding just an incredible amount of weight up in that tree. To make this a lot more pleasant, would be a couple glasses of hooch, Kentucky bourbon. But it's too early in the day. What time is it for me? It's 2:30. Yep, 2:30 is way too early for hooch. But, if it were 8 o'clock in the evening, it'd be perfect time to do this with a glass of whiskey and some music. Or a good survival movie on TV. I'll tell you what, when I got that the Swiss Army knife, and it come with that little non-sharp blade, it's just got a little like nail file on the side of it, I thought, why did they put that on there? What use is that going to come in handy? And I'll tell you, I probably use that non-sharp blade right there more often than I use any other blade on that knife. It's just so handy for so many things. It doesn't cut anything, but just as a little pick, I'll tell you, it comes in real handy. To the point where now I don't know if I could live without it. Keep that thing from moving. There we go. Those are my acorns soaking in there. You see how orange that water is? That is because of those tannins coming out of there. And believe it or not, that is an acorn right there. I'm just going to keep that in there. So I need to empty this water out several times, put fresh water in until all the tannins are leached out of those acorns. But that's what those are. All right. Okay, so I have emptied the water out of there. I haven't put fresh water in yet, but I wanted to show you the acorns. There we go. That's a lot of acorns. I'm going to put fresh water on top of that. In fact, why don't I just take you along with me while I do that? All right, it's the next day. Let's take a look-see. Got my dog helping me out there. Oh yeah, it's very orange. Let me show you how orange that is. Is there too much glare on that? There you go. Because of those tannins that have leached out of there. So I gotta empty all that and put in fresh water, and gotta keep doing that for a couple days. So fresh water. See how much more of those tannins we can leach out of there. can see how it's turned that water all orange there. So I'm just going to do one boil on this because these have been soaking for several days. But just a last hurrah to get the last amount of those tannins out of there. I want to take a moment this morning to talk about these acorns. They're right here. I'll give you a look, you see. I've got them in two groups. I've split them, and the reason why I've done this is I've tried to figure out how many I want to use for flour, acorn flour, and how many I want to use for a treat, like a snack, and also a coffee substitute. So a little bit more than half is what I'm using for my flour, and that's my plan anyway. And the rest I'm going to use for throughout the year as a snack and also as a coffee substitute. The process for both these things are going to be different. I want to roast the acorns that are for a snack and a coffee substitute. I don't want to roast my acorns that are going to be for flour. And it might not look like a whole great deal of acorns here to you, but believe me, once you start processing these down and turning them into a flour, well, you know, you turn them into dust, basically, is what you do, and it creates a lot of flour. There's another thing I wanted to show you. When you're first working with these acorns, it's nice when you shell them to be able to get a whole acorn. That feels good. But in the long run, it's probably not the best. The reason is that you want these things to dry out the way you're going to be working with them, to process them into flour and stuff like that, it's better to work with smaller pieces. So what's better when you're working with these acorns is that they split into like that. That's a better size to work with for the things we want to do with it. There was something else I want to tell you. Yeah, just like peanuts and just like all other nuts, these acorns, even after you get them out of the shell, they have a skin on them. And so I've been going through, let me show you this. See that? It's got a skin on it. You see that skin? And so I've been going through and taking those skins off there. They won't really hurt anything, and you know, if you were to grind these all up with the skins and everything, you wouldn't even know they were there. But when the skins are on there, they do kind of slow down drying. You want the inside, you want the whole acorn to dry out. Now the ones we're going to make into coffee and into a snack, it don't matter if they dry out. We're going to roast those on a skillet on top of a stove. That'll take care of that. But the ones that we're going to make into flour, they have to dry. We want them to dry completely out. Remember this principle. Try to remember this principle anytime you're working with any kind of food or even meat or anything like that out in the woods. Moisture is what leads to rot. So you've heard of them folks smoking meat. You know, beef jerky is just very dried meat. It's where the moisture has been taken out. Any type of moisture in your product is going to lead to rot. It's going to lead to infestation of with insects and stuff like that. So that's why for this flour, we want to get that. We want to get all of that moisture out of there. And the way I've decided I'm going to do that is I have a dehydrator oven in my house. And so I'm going to stick, the ones that I want to make into flour, I'm going to stick in the dehydration oven today. And the rest, like I said, we can just roast those on top of, in a skillet with some oil. And what have I done so far with these? I soaked them. I soaked them for about 4 or 5 days. Yeah, the water turned orange there a little bit, but not as quickly as I would have liked. I mean, I would have been soaking those for 2 months to get all the tannins out of there. So in the end, I gave them a real good boil, and that got a whole lot of tannins out in a really quick, short amount of time. And so that's where we're at. You know, it's been a process, but it's a really enjoyable process, and it's something that, like, while you do a little bit here, then you leave them, you do a little bit there, then you leave them some more. So it's not really intensive or exhausting or anything like that. You can kind of put them aside and then just do the next step whenever you're ready. So I'm just taking the skins off there. And then you end up with this bare acorn. So that's what I'm going to do. Follow me along. I know. I said I was going to stick them in the dehydrator, but got a nice sunny day here today, so I decided to stick them out in the sun all day again today. And you know, I don't know, that might do it. If it don't though, if there's any moisture in there at all for the ones I want to make flour out of, they'll have to go in the dehydrator. But I'm going to let them sit out here in the sun all day, and hopefully that'll help it right along. Let me show you where we're at. We've got all the acorns here going into the finishing stretch. They spent all day out in the sun, and they're pretty dry, but these acorns have like oils in them, you know, just like peanut butter has. And if you get all natural peanut butter, it's got a bunch of oil in it. That's just natural, but we don't want to keep those oils in the acorns that we want to make flour out of, because we don't want the flour to go bad after time. So I'm going to take these to the dehydrator. It's actually just a little oven. We're going to dehydrate these in the oven, and the rest we're going to roast in a pan. running out of gas. I'm going to have to change my gas canister. But let's take a look. Oh, it smells good. It smells really good. Getting there. Telling you what, these are really smelling good. Literally, it smells like walking around at a circus. So this is what we want. We want them to roast up nice and dark like that, because remember, it's these acorns here that are just going to be like a snack, and they're going to be a coffee substitute. And so they're going to grind up dark like coffee grinds up. So they got to be nice and roasted dark. So I've still got half of these that I've still got to dehydrate, and I'm still working on these. I've been doing this at about an hour at a time, but I kind of got to stick nearby to kind of supervise. I had a bad experience last year trying to do something similar, almost started a fire. Because of that reason, I need to stick by and kind of supervise, and at the same time, this is probably going to be the longest part of this whole process, is the flour dehydration part. You know, what would they do what would the American Indian do when they didn't have a dehydrator machine like this? Well, they would just set them out in the sun as long as necessary to dry those acorns out. I'm just speeding up the process a little bit using modern methods. I want to show off something interesting here. You see that? It's like dyed area there on my concrete. That is the tannins from those acorns I boiled. I boiled that water, you know, in the pan, filled up with tannins. And when I poured that water out there, I poured it right there on that concrete. And that's what those tannins, that's how much tannin came out of those acorns. It's dyed the concrete. So anyway, I want to show that off. I thought you guys might find that interesting. Let's take a look at the two different messes of acorns that I've got. I've got the acorns right here that I've dried out for flour, and I've got the acorns right here that I roasted as a snack, also as a coffee substitute, and I'm going to show them both off to you here now. Here's the ones that I roasted. I can't tell you how good that smells. It smells delicious. It's like roasted circus peanuts or something. But the way I did that was with olive oil, and I've salted those real good too. And the only thing that's left is just to store them And then when I want to snack on those, I can. Here, I'm snacking one right now. Yeah, that's delicious. That's really delicious. And so if I put those in a grinder and I grind those up, I can make that into a coffee substitute. And I'll be showing you that here in a little bit. But right now, what I really want to do is I want to get to these acorns here that I've dried out. And the only thing left to do with these is to turn them into flour. So I'm going to try to do that right now. And also, I need to get something to store these acorns here in. I know those probably don't look too appetizing. Let me get a spoon. They probably look burnt. They're not really burnt. They've still got quite a bit of olive oil on them there. They're not burnt. They're just roasted really dark. Just like you would do like with coffee beans. You know, dark roast coffee beans. Same thing here with these acorns. And I'm really proud of those. I'm looking forward to having those all winter long. Like I said, I will show you me grinding those up and turning them into coffee. A buddy of mine come by last week, and I let him snack on a couple of these, and he said, and he had never tried them before. They do. They taste like kind of like a coffee-like flavor. And he said he could understand then, after tasting them, why the Civil War soldiers would use acorns as a coffee substitute. Anyway, I've got a grinder right here, and I want to try to grind these up for flour. Let's do that. Temporarily, we're going to put the flour in this, and then I'll move the flour to something a little bit more permanent later on. Yeah. All right. Make sure I unplug that before I go sticking my finger in there. That is fantastic. Look how pure that looks. I love that. And I can make that into bread. I can make it into pancakes. I can do anything with this acorn flour all winter long. What a cool thing. Smells sort of like warm bread, like warm, fresh baked bread. I'm gonna let that thing rest for a second because it's I don't think it's really made for that. It's starting to get hot. It's amazing how much flour that's creating. That's about a little bit more than a half of my pot there of those acorns. Just a little bit more than half of that pot has made that much flour. That's a lot of flour, but that's what happens when you turn this stuff into, what would you call it? Powder. All right, that should be the last grind for the flour. That really made a nice amount of flour there. Check that out. All right, so the flour part is done. Put a lid on that. Wow, I'm really happy about that. All right, should we make a cup of coffee with these roasted beans here? Let's go ahead and do it. That's enough. That's enough for a cup of coffee. Cup of Acorn coffee. Uh-oh. I think this thing's overheated. It's overheated. So let's wait on that. We'll do that in a little bit. Here's a solution. Don't have to rely on a motor. No stinking motor that can give out. Wow, it smells so good. That's really a wonderful smell. Let's start with that. I know it's hard to see. Wow, it smells delightful. Look at how coffee like that is. Isn't that amazing? I'm gonna grind a little bit more. Wow, that smells so good. I'm literally doing this first thing in the morning. I haven't even had my shower yet this morning. Let's put a hat on here to make myself a little bit more presentable. My brush, my comb. Here's our first cup of Acorn coffee. Let's see how it goes down. Yeah, it's really pleasant. Of course, it doesn't have caffeine in it like coffee does, but it has that coffee taste, and it's got that coffee look. Absolutely. First time I ever heard about this was not with the American Indian. The American Indian did other things with the acorns, but as far as the coffee substitute goes, first time I heard about that was reading about when I read about the old Civil War soldiers using acorns as a coffee substitute. Well, then that's when I started trying it, and it didn't take very long for me to fall in love with it. And I wonder if that didn't happen to the old Civil War soldiers. You know, once they got out of the service, got back to their homes, I suspect that even when they had access to real coffee, that as the years went by, they got to missing the taste of that acorn coffee, and they'd go back to it every once in a while. So good. I wish I could share the flavor with you. Unfortunately, technology doesn't allow for that yet. Got my old beach lantern here. That's my table candle. Wow. So, time for me to get into my shower, get dressed, get my day started. I'll show you I'll do something with that acorn flour so that you folks can see some of the possibilities. You know, something you could do with that is you could mix that into your pancake batter for pancakes. You can make that into bread. I did some bread last year with acorn flour. One mistake that I made probably though is I was trying to fry her up in a pan. I mixed it with water at one point. I did a bunch of different things, but one of the things I did was I mixed it with water and I tried to fry that up in a pan, and that didn't go well. But what I imagine you could do is you could mix some with water, make it into a little mass, flatten that out into like a little cake, a thin cake, and then bake that. You know, poke some holes in it and then bake that. And I imagine it would turn out like an acorn cracker or something like that. I might try that. I just want to try making a little cracker here and seeing how that turns out. Look at that. It's turned into like a cracker. Alright. I probably baked it longer than I had to. But I just wanted to make sure that it was baked all the way through. So let's set up a camera and test this out. Alright, well, I imagine you would like to see me test out this acorn cracker that I just finished making in the oven, and I'm happy to do that. I think it's going to be it come out like a cracker. Got salt on the top. Well, it could be made a whole lot better than that. It needs more salt, believe it or not, but it doesn't taste terrible. That could be made a whole lot better with adding different ingredients and stuff like that, but honestly, I just, for simplicity's sake, what I wanted to do is just try to make a cracker, and it did that. That's just acorn flour mixed with water, spread on a pan, and salted. So, just like with regular flour, you know, there's all sorts of different preparation things you could do with it. The same is true for this acorn flour. So it can be used in a lot of different ways. I do what I put. I should have put salt on the bottom and on the top. But I'll tell you, it's pretty fantastic that you can do that with acorns. I'm trying to think of what to tell you it tastes like. It just tastes like a bread, like maybe a wheat or a rye bread. And it's got just a little tinge of bitterness to it. But not so much that it turns me off or anything like that. So here we go. Acorn cracker. This morning you saw me have my acorn coffee. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some scenes from last year when I worked with acorns to end the show. But I think for this year, and my work with acorns as far as what I share with you folks has been accomplished. Looking forward to moving on to other things now. I hope that the things that I've shared here have given you some ideas, and that you have an opportunity in your life to have the experience for yourself. That's producing a lot more flour than I expected it to. It's amazing. Looks like there's a hair in there. That's about the consistency I want right there. That's just acorn flour mixed with water. I can see we're going to have to follow up this experiment with one where we use a bonding agent like an egg or something. We want to see if we can get those to stick together, form like a patty. Look at that. It's like it's I broke it apart. Let's see if we can do this one. It's tough. It's tough to keep those together without something to bond it. Okay, those are our acorn patties. That was just with water. Now I want to try it with maybe an egg or maybe with some grease or something like that. This is bacon grease. So we're going to try this in just a second. I've actually already tried it, but what I mean is I'm going to let you see me try it. And we're going to try another patty here using bacon grease and see if that holds it together a little bit better, see if it cooks a little bit better. We still got a little bit left over there from when we just did it with the water. That is with leftover bacon grease. Dadgum, that's hard to keep together. All right, we're gonna have to go with the egg. All right, that's acorn mush. That was with the bacon grease. That smells the best so far, but of course it did not turn out the best so far. Now we're going to do something different. I hesitated to use this method because it's not always a sure thing that you'll have an egg out in the wilderness. What, doesn't that acorn flour just look so nice? Look at that. With the egg, it patties right up. As you've probably seen, I've used 3 different preparation methods here for these acorns, just as an experiment. And so right here is the first method we tried. This was acorn just with water. Acorn flour mixed just with water. Let's give it a try. What do you say? Salted. It's not bad. It tastes like... don't know how to describe it. Let's try another piece. It tastes kind of like rye bread or something like that. It's not bad. So that's definitely something you could do out in the field. Those were the methods I was trying to use. What might you have with you out in the field? And so what could you do with the acorns with what you have out in the field? Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. It just kind of tastes like bread. Like wheat bread or rye bread or something like that. So there you go. There's the method of just mixing with water and then forming into a patty and frying on a pan. A method I would have liked to have tried, but I'm not going to try right now. I might try it with the rest that I have left over, is baking. I would have liked to mix these with water, roll them out thin, poke some holes in them like crackers, and then bake them in an oven. Okay, the second preparation method that I used tonight was I mixed it with leftover bacon grease. So just my morning bacon, I took some of that bacon grease, leftover bacon grease, I formed it into a patty, tried to fry it, it didn't stick together. So this is more like acorn mush, but let's see how it turned out. Bigger piece in there. Not bad. Tastes about the same as the first one. All right. Yeah, it's not bad at all, actually. Huh. Yeah, it's not bad. Okay, so the third one here is the one that I was hesitant to do. I mean, I knew that it was probably going to be the one that turned out the best, but I was hesitant to do it because you ain't got an egg all the time when you're out in the woods, do you? So I was trying to avoid using any preparation methods that relied on things that you might not have with you in the woods. But here is the preparation method where I used an egg. So it was just an egg. I put in the acorn flour and beat that up. Let's see how it turns out. It smells good. Yeah, that's fantastic. Really good. I could eat that all day long. I mean, it doesn't taste much different than the first one we did with the water, just mixing with the water and trying to fry patty. It's just that because it holds together so well, look at that. I guess you'd call this kind of like an acorn tortilla or something, or acorn omelet. Look at that. It's so good. It's delicious. Wow. So that's definitely the winner. Man, if you got an egg with you when you're out in the woods and you have some of this acorn flour, that's a good deal right there. Wow. Wow, that's good.